Hello and welcome to Digging for the Truth with Ark and Neo. This is Arcologic. We are happy to be back after a long overdue hiatus, and tonight we've got a really exciting podcast. We're going to dig deep into the history of the Rajneesh cult. This is an amazing story that many people may not have heard about a group that basically took over a small little town in Antelope, Oregon, and tried to create their own utopia on Earth, which turned out, like most of these situations, into just the opposite. So this is going to be episode number 1 of a 2-part special. We really appreciate you guys being patient with us and appreciate all the emails that we've been getting, people requesting different types of shows. We've had a few people that have contacted us wanting to give their own testimonies, so we got lots of ideas backed up and in the works. Neo coaches high school football, so this is a very busy time of year for him, and it's just been one thing after another, and this is the first we could get to it. So if you'd like to support us, you can go to destinylab.com and support our truth music, our reality rap. We are currently working on music for our 4th album, as well as a lot of collaboration projects with other artists. So stay tuned for that. If you haven't already, please join our mailing list. If you join our mailing list at destinylab.com, that will also include all of the updates for Digging for the Truth with Ark and Neo. So if you haven't already, please go there and do that. We've got a lot of things in the works, so stay tuned. Any feedback, any ideas, please give it to us, destinylab@gmail.com. Again, check out our videos at youtube.com/DestinyLab. Like I said, we really appreciate your patience. Hello and welcome to Digging for the Truth with Ark and Neo. We're back. Neo's been coaching a lot of football during football season this year, and so he's been tied up with that a lot. But tonight we're going to talk about the Rajneesh cults and the New Age cults and how these tie into the ancient pagan cults of old, and how it all kind of relates together, and how this guru was able to take over an entire city in Oregon, and how this cult and belief system today is larger than ever. So, how you doing tonight, Neo?
Hey, doing great, Art. So I'm glad we're back to doing some podcasts. So this is exciting.
Yeah. I know we tried to get together one time, and we tried to do one podcast before this, and for some reason I could not get my Skype to work. We tried for like 2 hours to get my Skype up, and I couldn't get it to work for some reason. So I've had the odds stacked against us here, but we're finally back, and this will be a good little talk here. So
yeah, well, yeah, we did a podcast on the pagan gods of the Old Testament, and what I'm thinking is we'll review that just a little bit on one of the cults, one of those pagan worshiping practices of the Old Testament, of the Ashtoreth worship, and then kind of give you guys a little refresher on what that is, and then hopefully you can see some of the parallels to what's still going on today, because it is alive and well with these same things. So Deuteronomy 18:10 and 11 says this: "There shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or daughter to pass through the fire, or that useth divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer." And those were I believe the 9 things that we talked about of different attributes of some of these old pagan worship of demons. Is basically what it is. It's demon worship.
It sounds like all the exact things that they did do.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. You're not supposed to do them, but they did them anyway. So, and people today are still doing them. So we want to tie us in. So, just to remind you that the Ashtoreth, that was the deity that was associated with sexuality, with fertility, and it was probably tied to a Mesopotamian cult of Ishtar, and which we actually we get the name of a Christian holiday called Easter, which is from a pagan idea. We really should not be worshiping Easter. We should call it Resurrection Sunday would be okay, but we really shouldn't call it Easter. Easter is not a Christian word in any sense. It's basically from this original Ashtoreth or Ishtar, and
yeah, there's some creepy origins in the Easter If you look into the pagan origins, where they would, dip, I guess, eggs in blood or something to that effect.
Oh yeah,
It's where we
yeah.
get the idea of coloring Easter eggs. I mean, just really strange stuff.
Yeah, and basically Ashtoreth worship was one of the things that swayed King Solomon, and he was corrupt. He was criticized in 1 Kings 11:5 about what he did, and this is where you read about in the Bible where they worshipped in the groves and around the Ashtoreth poles, which are basically around the green trees.
Yeah,
and they had sex in some kind of a ceremony. It was ceremonial sex acts that they performed.
Yeah, well, I know it's like the maypole, celebrations are still, celebrated a lot in traditions, and even at different schools, they celebrate, do these maypole rituals with kids and a lot of these things. But it goes back to even, like you said, the Christmas tree, like we've talked about before, and things like that. It's pretty weird. I mean, the whole sex magic thing too, that sex rituals, the most modern guy was this Aleister Crowley guy that supposedly did a bunch of this stuff, and
oh yeah,
and that's how they, focus energy toward a curse or some sort of like power that they want. All kinds of crazy things. So
yeah, and that sounds exactly what some of the sessions that the Rajneeshis did. Exactly the same thing. So they performed these same rituals in modern times.
yeah.
And if you remember about Ashtoreth, she was also they'd found statues that had a female deity that would perform basically milk would come out of the nipples of the statue, and they claimed it to be that was their god, it was alive, and that they would go and drink from the milk, and this would be their offering. So it was some crazy things, but these guys would be in these temples worshiping, and they would be in this come to this crazy climax of energy, just like we're going to hear about later. And they would be in a state where they would believe anything, and they are opening themselves up to demonic possession as well.
Yeah, these ecstatic states, and I think in ancient times they did use a lot of drugs as well. That they, in modern times, we know scientifically, oh, this is a chemical, that is how it relates to the brain, or at least this is what we think, what drugs are. Where you imagine in ancient times they had no necessary connection to how that stuff works. In their mind, that was just some sort of a magical incantation. I mean, you ate this mushroom, and all of a sudden, you'd be seeing all these colors and going into this other dimension, or whatever they were drugs they were taking. And I think oftentimes they would disguise these drugs into a brew or into something that was just part of a bigger ritual, to where it was, not necessarily even known what was bringing them to this state, the people that were partaking. Only the shaman really knew.
Oh yeah, yeah. They're not really aware what's going on. They just know that it's different. It's a different state, and they're opened up, and then they can't describe it with words. You hear the interviews today about these people, and when they get to this, they're trying to achieve what they call enlightenment. It's a state that they can't describe in words, and they also talk about there being a connection to their leader, to the Bogwan Shree Rajneesh, who is the leader, also called Osho, he's been dead for almost 25 years now, but his cult is larger than ever now. Huge following from all over people, from primarily wealthy people and highly educated people. So this is something that attracts people that are very intelligent. They get into this for some reason. This is the type of I think this is what the Ashtoreth worship was too. It attracted the upper echelon. It attracted the King Solomons and the ruling elite class. This wasn't people, running around in black robes and doing, and cutting things and doing different things like this. This is what they consider to be a great thing, is a good thing in their eyes.
Yeah, these weren't, high school kids, killing cats on Halloween, these were actual, people leading entire nations and, entire cultures based upon these principles.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about the ancient Ashtoreth worship is that the females were asked to sacrifice either hair or their chastity. So one of those two things, and that's pretty, the Rajneeshis were asked to give up all their money, and they did so willingly, and they were also performed sex acts with lots of different people in there. And if they got pregnant, they were encouraged to have abortions, and in many cases there was forced sterilizations of many people, so they could partake in this enlightened state of sexual intercourse without having to bring in a child into the situation. So kind of strange.
Well, it's funny. Yeah, it's funny how this, the whole sexual thing just happens to be this central theme in a lot of these cults, whether it be the Charles Manson cult or the modern day Raelians. The Raelians are a group that believe in, this guy that had contact with some, alien character, and it's all about, basically, having all these sexual orgies and whatnot. And there's this really interesting documentary on Netflix, and it's kind of fascinating because it's the same type of thing, where this guy, creates this kind of group of people, and it just grows and grows and grows, and how it changes over time, and always the same type of things where people start wearing the same colors, people start shaving their heads, bald, and then all of a sudden they're given these new names by the leader, and then all of a sudden, halfway in, he suddenly decides, hey, I got this intuition and I'm supposed to have multiple partners, and I'm supposed to actually have, take your wife, and she's supposed to be my wife now. And all these crazy things that just, change over time.
Funny how it works out that way, but, and this is also connected in the Bible when Jezebel was a worshiper of the female goddess, and she had 400 priests under her employment, and that's in 1 Kings 18:19, and she was called the Queen of Heaven in Jeremiah 44:25. And we still have these Asherah poles all over the place. These are the obelisk. Anything that is a tall phallic symbol, like we find in Washington D.C., is a statue of this type of worship, and we have it in our capital.
Yeah.
One of the other things is that she's also depicted as the female counterpart of Baal or Baal, and she has wings and the feet of an owl, and also kind of connected with Diana worship. So, like I said before, everything kind of morphs. So you have to really look at what they do rather than what they call themselves, because the name changes, but what they do is always the same.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the other thing that's interesting, you look at these ancient depictions of some of these beings, these female deities, and oftentimes they'll be holding two snakes in each hand, or two representations of this duality, or and they're in the middle holding these two things that they control. So that's kind of a fascinating thing. It's kind of like the Starbucks image, or the mermaid image of this mermaid grabbing its tail and opening itself up to again, the sexual relation.
Oh yeah, that's kind of the history of the ancient biblical worship of Asherah or Ashtoreth or Ishtar, whatever you want to call it. But let's kind of talk a little bit about the Rajneeshis and what they were all about. And what's kind of interesting is that these Rajneeshis, they feel a connection to the Bhagwan, and the Bhagwan is their leader. That's Bogwan Shree Rajneesh. That's their, also called Osho. He changed his name to Osho after he left the United States and had his Puram in India. But it's almost a supernatural drawing. They can't describe it. but they're drawn to him and devoted to him completely. And he's their enlightened master. I mean, they're his slaves and he's their master.
Yeah.
Is how they that's self-described.
Yeah.
And they do whatever he says without question. And these initiates are called sannyasins, is what they're called. And
that sounds familiar.
Yeah. A lot of the names just keep getting, brought up, even if it's in a different language,
Yeah, I mean, Simyaza, Simyazins, Sannyasas. I mean, there's so many derivatives of that same name, which is, like we've talked about before, according to the Book of Enoch, that's the fallen angel that brought forth witchcraft and pharmakia.
Yeah. So it's funny how that works again, that I guess nobody makes that connection except for, people that believe that the Bible's God's word.
Yeah.
Now, one of the interesting things that kind of was brought up in my mind was the old Conan the Barbarian movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And
yeah, sure.
Yeah, Arnold's nemesis in one of the movies was James Earl Jones, and he was called Thulsa Doom, and he was the commander of this huge cult, and it was a snake cult, and he had captured Conan. What was that?
What a coincidence.
Yeah, what a coincidence, yeah. So anyway, he had such connection with all his followers, he said, Conan, watch this. This is real power. And he said, come to me, my darling. They had all his followers, again, dressed in all the same color, in robes, all peaceful. And he said, come to me. And she willingly just jumped off the cliff to get him and killed herself. And that's actually a recount of a real event that happened from a guy named Hassan I-Sabah, who is the Nizari leader, which is from the ancient Arab sources. And this is what happened to when a dignitary went to visit him. He asked one of his followers to leap to his death to demonstrate his power over all of his people, that they had such devotion to him that they would willingly kill themselves to demonstrate that. And that's exactly what this James Earl Jones did in that movie, and it's in fact, you'll see a lot of these same types of devotion to Bhagwan Shree Rajneesh or Osho later on in the stories that we'll tell you.
Well, I think that's the same thing that supposedly I can't remember exactly who it was, Tiberius or one of these leaders that was just completely embraced evil. He had his palace on the top of this giant mountain, and the same thing. He would just, for fun, just have people leap to their death or throw people off cliffs just to, see what patterns they made on the rocks. I mean, just twisted.
Yeah, that's craziness. Now, there's 4 or 5 different properties that all these Rajneeshis, who again are called sannyasins, do. One of them is they wear red, pink, orange, something to that color robes, and they all have wooden necklaces with a picture of the Bhagwan on them. So every one of them is exactly the same. So they give up their dress, so they all look the same. And this wooden necklace, is always right near their heart, handmade wooden necklace that they all wear. And they also are given new names. They break away from their old identity and are given new names.
How original.
Yeah, again, yeah. Nothing new, is there? Nothing new under the sun. I think we got a song about that.
Yeah.
So they're called Swami for males and Ma for females. So they all given that as their prefix to their total name. And so they don't go by their old name. And these people are so devoted to this one man that they do everything for him. They hand make all his clothes, and he only wears them once. He never wears anything more than once.
Wow!
And it's handmade or it's imported, from the best. He has.
That's because they sell his dirty clothes on eBay.
Probably, yeah. Um, he has a personal kitchen with only his food is prepared in there, and all the food is imported in from Germany and prepared by his personal chef. And it's all carefully weighed and measured because he had a lot of health problems as he was in Oregon. The Bhagwan did. He had, in some claims, 198 Rolls Royces. Again, his excesses were just legendary on how much money for people to just give him.
Yeah, the second largest Rolls Royce collection in the world,
it's
I
just
think.
insane how much wealth went through there by a few thousand people. Because again, it was the people that are attracted to this are the highest educated and the most wealthy people on the planet. In fact, there's royalty that are devotees of him from some of the European countries that have given up just to live the lifestyle of a initiate of the Bhagwan.
Wow. So they actually gave their titles up of royalty to go follow this guy. Amazing. Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that whoever's richest as well is sort of put in positions of higher authority.
Yeah, we'll definitely see that the egos, most people basically gave up their egos, but there were a few that were in charge of different things that their egos were definitely being gone almost into insanity because the demons that are possessing them will drive you to madness and eventually death or killing others. That always happens in these types of cults, and we'll see it in this one as well.
What's incredible, and from my understanding, he didn't even do anything.
Yep.
He didn't even talk.
No, he didn't talk for a long time.
And he put some that sort of ran everything. The Sheila lady that took control.
Yeah, no, we'll talk a lot about Sheila. She was one of them she definitely had an ego, and it ran amok. That ego was really brought to the surface by the demons that were possessing her. One of the other interesting things is that the people, these Rajneeshis, use meditation. One of the meditations is called dynamic meditation. You can go to their webpage right now and read about all their different types of meditations. But they basically, even though they don't say this, but they do allow demons to possess their victims. And you can watch videos of the inhuman voices that they're talking about, the movements which don't look human. And they're inviting the demons to come into their bodies by going through these meditation experiences, and they're really insane. They're crazy what happens, and you can watch lots of videos of them doing it. One of them is called dynamic meditation. I'll just kind of go through the 5 steps of what this meditation entails, and you can go to osho.com, osho.com. That's their webpage. It's got hundreds of thousands of followers worldwide. They still charge a lot of money for their materials and tell you how to do all these meditations. There's still people from the original Rajneeshi commune that was in Antelope, Oregon. There was several thousand people. There's still people today that are part of this. They went with him back to India, and they have been there ever since. But
now this group is one of the main groups that brought things like yoga and meditation and the words like namaste that people throw around so routinely, and brought this stuff over to the States. My understanding, this group was one of the main foundations of bringing this stuff to our culture. Is that right?
Oh yeah, they've got a huge marketing branch of their company. Very high markup on their products, but they, appeal again to the very wealthy, people that are well off to do. And a lot of times people that are very wealthy have a lot of free time, and they explore, they experiment because they have nothing else going in their lives. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to work. They just have lots of time to do these things. And I think that's why they're drawn to this, because they somehow think this is that they can experience the supernatural. This is the way for them to, become enlightened or become a god. It goes right back to Genesis. They want to become gods. They want to become the ultimate human.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they are basically giving their entire will up to a demonic entity.
Oh, yeah.
Let me go through this meditation, because I think this might help you understand who they are, and then we'll go right into that story. But it's a 50-minute session. So, and there's 5 different stages that are each 10 minutes long each. And the first one is what's called the chaotic breathing. And chaotically breathe through your nose, and let it be super deep and tense, and without any rhythm or pattern. And you always concentrate on the exhale. And and in this state, they're moving around. They look kind of crazy, but they're trying to basically hyperventilate themselves. And
yeah, I've seen people doing this.
Yeah, their bodies are kind of flapping around. Some of them look like they're flying. They have chicken wings, and they're doing the chicken wing dance, and other of them are kind of just, shaking their head violently, but they're trying to it looks really weird. That's stage 1. They do that for 10 minutes straight. Don't do anything but that for 10 minutes straight. Then the next 10 minutes is even worse.
If they don't pass out.
Yeah. And it's supposed to feel a building up. And the second stage is called explode. Because, see, they believe that modern man is oppressed. They've got all these inner oppressions in their body that they need to somehow, get out. Fear and different things like that. And so this second stage is called explode. And this is when it's just the craziest. They go into a tantrum. It looks like a little kid in a tantrum. They're screaming. And that's what they tell you to do. It says go totally mad. Pretend like you're insane. Kick, scream, dance, sing, laugh, throw yourself around, hold nothing back. Keep your whole body moving.
Yeah, you can see that on the ground where they're just throwing themselves on the ground. Just rooms of thousands of people doing this at the same time. And
that's what it is. Yeah, there is. There's that many people in one room, and it says, don't let your mind interfere what's happening. You just consciously go mad and be total. Your whole body should be moving. So, and they do that again for 10 minutes, the explode session, the tantrum session. The third stage is you put your arms above your head and you jump up and down and you shout a mantra over and over called who. For 10 minutes, that's all they do is say who. So again, there's that repetitive thing, the murmuring, which is called in the Bible. There's many things that say don't do this. Well, what are they doing? They're doing exactly what the Bible says not to do.
And it could be any word, probably.
Yeah, it could be anything. There's others that they say a different word, but this primarily this who word, and they're supposed to say it as deeply as possible. And this is where you can hear some of them where they don't sound human. They sound more animal, and they look like animals too.
Maybe it's the owl.
Yeah.
Ooh, the Bohemian Grove owl. That's where you get their idea.
Yeah, and what they want you to do is they want you to land on your feet and let the sound hammer deep into your sex center. That's what they call it, because this is a trying to build up your sexual energy is what this stage is trying to do. And it says to give all you have and exhaust yourself completely. They want, and so by this time they're sweating profusely. If they're old, usually in most time the Rajneesh cult was 35 and under. The older people had a hard time doing this stuff because it was so physically demanding. But there was still lots of people that did it, And the fourth stage was strange. And one of the things, this kind of shows the connection. So here they are in this deep state of who. And some of the people that describe this section, by this time they say that their mind is completely gone. They can't remember anything after a few minutes into the who session. Who. They're doing that over and over again. And then by this time their mind just is completely blank and they can't really remember the fourth stage. And the fourth stage is called stop. And the leader will just say stop. And wherever they're at, whatever body position they're in, they stop. So sometimes their arms are up, sometimes they're down, sometimes they're on the ground in a weird position, one leg up, and they just stop and they sit there for 15 minutes.
Yeah, freeze.
And they just freeze.
Just weren't landing on one leg at that moment.
Yeah, but they do sometimes. They're just frozen. They look like statues. And it's just incredible that one word, there's only one word sentence, just stop. And exactly at that moment, all 100 or 1,000 people instantly stop.
Hive mind.
They're all connected at that time. We know why, through these demonic entities and head demon who's in charge of them all. Sure. It's kind of their little dance, their little celebration. They've got these few thousand people under their claws now.
Well, it's this universal focus of intent that people talk about, where, and you hear this talked about all the time. If we could just get everyone to focus their energy toward this one, this one idea of peace on earth or oneness or whatever that would raise our consciousness to this new level, and that there's huge groups of people in all varieties of worldviews that get together and try in their different ways to collectively raise consciousness in one form or another through universal movement, universal chanting, and hive mind mentality. And I think this is kind of like what the internet is this next level that's going to be taken to, is where people will digitally take this intent to another level.
Oh yeah, who knows what technology can add to this craziness. Stage 5, the stage 5 is to celebrate. They just celebrate with dance, music, or whatever. So that whatever sometimes turns into sexual intercourse as well. So, and that's the 5 stages, and they have many meditations, but they all have very similar things they do. And it's basically to allow your body to be taken over. That's the final intent of it. And this is where they can't describe, and they a lot of times can't even remember what happened, until this 5th stage comes about, and then they just come out like they've come out of a dream, is how they describe it. But they love it. These people love it. They have no will of their own, and you can kind of see it. So,
well, it's really interesting. I was reading as well where they actually have these like padded rooms that they put people in and take them through these group experiments called Pune Workshops that basically make these guys like fight each other. Like they literally, like they say, do anything you want to everybody. Like take your whole anger, all of your fear, all of your hate out on everyone around you. And people get like broken bones, taken to the hospital. People have died, committed suicide.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's just complete manipulation, and this stuff is just buried because these guys had a town within themselves. It's not like they were governed by some police force.
No.
They governed themselves. If somebody died or they wanted to take somebody out or traumatize someone, and manipulate someone, they could completely do this without anybody stopping them.
Yeah. Well, that's a good segue into the eyewitness account. There's a gal named Jane Stork, and for 9 years she was a devotee to what's called the sex guru, Bogwan Shree Rajneesh, and again, he was the guy that had this cult in the 70s and 80s that led this cult, and they wore orange and clothes and had free love, and she was part of that for 9 years. So she was in the inside, and this is her story about, and she wrote a book called Breaking the Spell, My Life as a Rajneeshi and the Long Journey Back to Freedom. So this lady she gave up her identity and gave up her home. She was from West Australia, and she was a housewife and a mother. And she gave all that up, left her family, left her name, left her country, and became Ma Shantri Bhadra. And in her book, she says, hey, I was a woman prepared to do anything, even murder for her master.
Wow.
And she was asked just to do that, too. And she basically talks about how she got sucked into the cult and finally broke free after being jailed. for an attempt to kill the Bhagwan's doctor. So she was asked to do that. So again, all these things, even though, some people enter thinking, oh, this, it's made up, it's free, it's love, it's great. There is things in the inside, in the working, that always lead to death, destruction, and they don't want people to be happy or to have life. They want them to die.
Well, what's so sad about a lot of these people that are victim fall in line with the intentions that we're born with, to seek a relationship with our Creator, back to the source, through this servanthood toward God, and that's what it's about, is becoming a servant of God. That's and that's what we're told to do, is becoming born again. We must die to ourselves. And that's what Satan tries to counterfeit over and over again.
Oh, yeah.
Through these people who give up their themselves and their identity to these things, but it's this false belief system, because it never lasts. I mean, that's what seems to be so different, is you hear these accounts and they never seem to last. They always be temporary, whether it's the DMT experiences or the Kundalini yoga or whatever. They always got to go back to a higher level to take it to a deeper point, into where they're taken into madness eventually.
Yeah, and that it's an interesting story. Like Jane Stork, this lady just talking about, who wrote the book. She talked about how she got into this system, and it was, she visited a psychologist. She just went for therapy to help her out on some, marital problems and things like that. And the psychologist, who worked for the public health system in Australia, had just returned from Pune, India, where he went to the Bhagwan's ashram. And doesn't that sound familiar? They call his place of meditation an ashram. It's like Ashtoreth, and Asherah, it's called an ashram.
Again, what a coincidence.
And it's called their place of religious retreat. So this guy, this psychologist, went to a retreat there, and he was now wearing orange robes and a bead of beads around his neck with the Bhagwan's picture on it. So he went there, and when he came back, he was a devotee of them, even though he's still practicing in Australia. And so he kind of talked to her about this, that this might help. And so that guy became her mentor. And in 1978, Jane Stork, those Australians, went to India. And later, her husband and her children, who were only 10 and 8, went to India too. She was so enthralled with this lifestyle and of the Bhagwans that she moved her whole family.
Wow.
And even though she brought up as a Catholic, she bought right into this. It didn't take long. It's so quick. These brainwashing techniques that they use are so fast that they will get you into this system in just a matter of days. But pretty soon, she actually figured out that this wasn't what it's cracked up to. She still had enough common sense to look through what was happening, because a lot of the things that made her uncomfortable were a lot of the group sex, the partner swapping, and then there was deliberate moves to fragment families in this ashram, where they would drive wedges between husbands and wives and parents and children. They would try to separate them into different groups. They just say, hey, you need to go with the wives for a while. For the next 2 weeks, you need to go to this special training. And so they'd all be separated, and then it was all to get rid of their identity. You're not a family anymore. You're part of a bigger family of the Bhagwans, so that they become devoted to them. And
wow.
What was interesting is that 87% of the residents had STD, sexually transmitted disease, and the women who became pregnant
goodness.
were told by the Bhagwan to abort or sterilize. That was it. There was no other choice. You got to abort or sterilize. And she and her teenage daughter were both sterilized.
Wow. That's...
And, yeah. So anytime, yep. So women would write the Bhagwan, she says, and say, hey, I'm pregnant, what should I do? And he'd always say, abort and sterilize.
I mean, what's so creepy, too, is that, imagine being a group like this. There's no real foundation. There's no written code or source that actually you can go to and or law I guess, that you can go to and say, okay, here's how we decide this. It's just this guy, and he changes it as you go along.
Yep.
So he's changing it as you go. He has one thing where, he puts all, this lady in control, and then he changes it to something else and something else, so it's like, anybody with, that's left with any type of sense of with their brain is going to recognize, wow, there's no rhyme or reason to this. This guy's basically just, changing things to fit his own, needs, or the needs of what he thinks he can most manipulate people with, especially once people start leaving. Because my understanding is lots of people definitely left, not just this gal, but a whole bunch of people left, or were even kicked out. But
and that's so they'd say, if you don't like it, leave. So it was either their way or no way. And her daughter was sexually abused on the commune. And see, this lady Stork was actually in the inner circle of Ma Sheila's inner circle. So that was Sheila was the secretary to the Bhagwan in Oregon, and basically Stork was one of the puppets, and eventually like a scapegoat for the fall woman. So, but she says this was all orchestrated by the Bogwan Shree Rajneesh, but Sheila and the other people took the fall for him, because if you remember, he never spoke. He didn't speak at all until Sheila went down, because Sheila was doing all his dirty work for him.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that story here in a little bit. But that's an eyewitness report by, and you can read her book, by this lady named Jane Stork. That'd be an interesting interview if you get the Jane Stork and interview her about this. Would be pretty amazing. But she wrote a book called Breaking the Spell: My Life as a Rajneesh and the Long Journey Back to Freedom.
Wow.
Let's talk a little about Bhagwan. Who is this guy? How did he become the master?
Yeah, what's his story there?
Well, he's born in India in 1931, and he achieved, is what they call it, his first samadhi, which means the beginning of knowledge without any end, at 14.
Now, who's the one that determines that?
Yeah, I don't know. That's what I'm trying to. Yeah, that's what I don't know. But yeah, it might have just been self-professed, or who knows? Maybe it's a family tradition. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I've been studying a lot of the Hindu and Buddhist tradition. There seems a lot of self-appointed specialists, or just basically people just pick to be leaders even at birth, or little babies in the Buddhist tradition. And in the Rajneesh tradition, there you got to just go be under some enlightened master. Then all of a sudden they just proclaim you as this guy's reached godhood. And they just start telling everybody that. You basically just have to be proclaimed that by someone who is a master.
Yeah. Well, he said in the 50s and 60s, so when he was between 20 and 30, he was actually professor of philosophy at India's Jabalpur University, and
so he's well educated.
Oh yeah, he's a well-educated guy. Yeah. In 1974, he founded his first ashram. And by the way, the word ashram comes from the Sanskrit root sarama, which means giving the meaning of making an effort towards liberation.
Okay.
So, so anyway, some of the guys that have been followers of Bhagwan have been the Japanese composer Kitaro and former Francisco Ruddy, and the producer of The Godfather was a devotee of him. So there's lots of people and there's probably another dozen that we could name off, but
high-ranking people.
But anyway, his disciples had a combination of crazy wisdom, tantric sexual practices, sometimes violent to the report of broken bones, like you were saying earlier. It's all part of the Western Human Potential movement and encounter groups, which are still around. He's also been called the guru of the vagina, which kind of crazy because he slept with so many of his female disciples, and they were called the special darshans. And darshans means a vision or a glimpse granted to them. And so that's what he called these women.
It's like a perverse paradise. Just like, yeah, I'll go through the motions as long as I basically, get to trick all these women into thinking I'm enlightened enough to have sex with them.
Oh, yeah. So, and that's what he did. He would ask the attractive women to strip in front of him so he could meditate while watching them. So, yeah, voyeurism, all kinds of stuff that were just, crazy. And so just different things that that they were asked to do that were just, crazy things that we probably don't even want to talk about. But if you really want to know, you can search out the information on your own. So, but it was crazy. It was definitely a sex cult, and he had his 12 female mediums that he had for his ashram, for his nightly energy darshans, is what they called them. So these 12 women would do whatever he needed them to do.
And there you go is the counterfeit, which is a common theme of these false gurus and fake antichrist leaders, is having 12 disciples, trying to mimic, Christ. I've seen that time and time again where these leaders do that exact same thing, or they'll have 12 wives.
Yeah, well, it's crazy. One of his quotes that he because a lot of women wanted to be part of his darshan, the 12, and see, he basically in his quote said, "Only one with large breasts could hope for the honor." And he said, "I have been tortured by small-breasted women for many lives together.
Torture.
And I will not do it in this life." That's what he said. So that's really enlightened, isn't it?
Yeah, I can see this guy, really similar to the way that Ron L. Hubbard formed Scientology. It's all tongue-in-cheek. He's not really going in there serious. He's literally behind the scenes just laughing, head to palm, just like, I can't believe these people are falling for this. Let me see what crazy thing I can do next to see if they'll actually buy it.
Yeah, so, he had a lot of strippers that worked for him. It was a crazy... Driving around in... the Rolls Royces. Yeah, Rolls Royces, 93 in total.
That's just hilarious.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. I mean, that's just funny. That's something that a comedian would do as a joke. Like, I'm going to do this so in your face that it just gets to a point where it's absurd.
Yeah, it was it was crazy, and it was called Club Meditation. That's what they called his, his ashram, because it wasn't Club Med, it was Club Meditation, because it had discos, it had bars, lounges, gaming tables, all these things. I mean, and people paid thousands and thousands of dollars, and they would be part of their, their meditation scenes, which were, sex cult things, and again, lots of these people got into it. And
so it sort of appealed to the materialistic side as well, even though it took all their money away. It still...
Oh, yeah. Well, they thought, this is spiritual. This isn't anything bad. This is a spiritual thing. This is going to help me achieve enlightenment, so I have to do this. That was probably the entice of these people that went and did it, that, pretty crazy stuff.
Interesting.
But, you asked the question, what brought these people to Oregon? What made them do all these things? So,
yeah.
Basically it was the Bogwan Shree Rajneesh. He needed a new place to build his worldwide commune. That was his original intent. He wanted to build a commune because he ran out of space in India. So he wanted some place that had lots of place to expand, where they could be left alone and just build 1,000 people, 10,000, 100,000, get as many people as possible there. Eventually, that's what he wanted to do. I
wonder if he was using Joseph Smith as a kind of like, well, they did it in Utah.
Yeah.
Might as well, I can do it in Oregon.
Who knows? Well, and economically, he probably thought, well, hey, I'm a small town philosophy professor, and Enlightenment pays a lot better, so I'm going to go with the Enlightenment gig, and he did. He built a thriving enterprise, attracting Westerners with his lectures, his group therapies, and all these people sought to have meaning for their lives and escape the Western world. And the other thing he did, he had a lot of smart lawyers working for him. And see, he was also in trouble in India for illegal behavior, smuggling, tax fraud, and so he went halfway around the map to a place called the Big Muddy Ranch, which is 100 square miles of range land, about an hour's drive north of a town called Madras, Oregon. Which, if anybody knows where Bend, Oregon, which is basically in the center of Oregon, it's just north of that by an hour, and it's basically in the middle of nowhere. I mean, John Day River, it's close to the John Day River, and what's interesting is that the Rajneesh's commune is now owned by a Christian organization that puts on camps for youth camps, and it's a huge attraction. Thousands of Christian kids go there each summer to enjoy the lakes and the nice things because they bought it. And
thank you, Rajneesh.
Yeah, thanks for building that for us in the middle of nowhere. So, but see, they came there, and the first contingent of these Rajneeshi, they moved to Oregon in the summer of 1981. And, Antelope has 39 people. That's all that lives in that town, and they couldn't, help but notice that all these people were wearing kind of reddy shoes and all their clothes, because most of them wore blue jeans, and they were all farmers and ranchers.
Very small town.
Oh yeah, it was a very small town, and after they bought that, they the people noticed that they looked different. They all had these wooden necklaces that had the photo of some bearded guy who was the Rajneeshi, and immediately the chief of staff was Ma Anand Sheila, who was 31 years old, and she was native to India, and she's going to be basically the villain of this, but she basically, I think, takes the fall for Bhagwan. He never admits it, but most people that are in the inner circle say that, because he said it was all her, but most people think that he was really the one controlling her actions. But she was a very dynamic, well-spoken leader, so she was very quick-witted, but you could all see that she had an ego. And she was very hungry for power, and she would do whatever it took to get what they needed done. And so she really charmed a lot of the Oregonian ranchers and politicians early on. She hosted dances where the cowboys partied down until dawn and had everything they wanted. They brought in the food, the drinks, and she even bought 50 head of cattle from the Wasco County commissioners, even though the commune was all vegetarian, just as a good favor. So, they were trying to make friends.
What'd she do with them?
Who knows?
Freedom to the wild?
Yeah, probably. They milked them free. Set them free, yeah.
They need to be wild cows.
Yeah, and she kept assuring them, hey, we're just simple farmers. We're here to just farm and just be peaceful. We just want to live a peaceful life. And, and they were very nice people. The people that met them, they said, man, these people are really nice. They're, they're very, respectful and all this kind of stuff. And
that's what's sad, going back to, what we were talking about earlier, I think, most of these people, you feel bad for them because I think they're searching for the very thing that they want, that we all are searching for. They just got caught up in a deception. A false imitation.
Oh, yeah.
And that's going to do it for episode number 1 of this 2-part series on the Rajneesh. We continue to talk about going deep into the details of the story, so be sure and stay tuned for the second part of this interview, which will be posted soon. As always, if you have any questions, comments, if you want to support us, go to destinylab.com or contact us at destinylab@gmail.com. And we're going to close out tonight with our song, The Countdown. featuring Chris White from our album Naturally Selected, which is available at destinylab.com. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great night.
You can reject them and continue the way that you are, but you have to do it on the facts if you are a real member of the truth movement.
Throughout time, man has been influenced by what seems to be two opposing forces, darkness and light, struggling for the control of the souls of mankind. A global epidemic, pandemonium ensues. Search for the truth, don't be apathetic. Pick your side of the life, wrong or right, blind or with sight. One or the other, yes, it's that black and white. It's not that I'm close-minded, but what I found is not up for debate. It's concrete and solid, truth is absolute. Move toward it, you can't afford to be aloof or waste a single moment. Know that any second our lives could end. Don't pretend or deny that life's not a gift. Don't give in to temptations. Get defense from the enemy, he seeks to destroy you. He purposely will mislead you. Keep it from the path, I implore you. Stay on it, pray without ceasing. Don't just talk about it, walk it, show it. If you know about God's love, shout it from the rooftops. Investigate, read the Gospels, don't stop. Contemplate, ask yourself important questions. Spark your curiosity, make a search for something more than just the basics. There's no time for delay. The countdown, we're at the crossroads. You need to separate above from the below. You gotta get in control, you gotta let go. You better decide soon before it explodes. You hear the countdown, we're at the crossroads. You need to separate above from the below. You gotta get in control, you gotta let go. You better decide soon before it explodes. There's no room for confusion. Stay awake and be focused. Expose these illusions, rebuke them. Run the other way and refuse them. Make the choice to flee from the enemy. Choose this very day to turn the other way. No one knows the hour or the day that Christ will return. It could happen any moment. Every minute counts, so grab life, own it. Forgive your opponents. Know that we are saved by His grace and not works, but also that faith without works is absurd. Works are just a side effect and a reflection of His power working through you. It's your testimony. One way to tell a Christian from a phony. What part of the body are you serving? Find your place and then work at it, own it. Don't be afraid to be bold through Him. Build upon the rock, attack every obstacle. Slow to anger, knowing every day that He works in your favor. Every breath you take is a gift to behold, and every step we take is one that's bestowed. Quiet your soul, you are not alone. Before you were born, you were already known. You were made with a purpose and a plan, created by the great I Am. You hear the countdown, we're at the crossroads. You need to separate above from the below. You gotta get in control, you gotta let go. You better decide soon before it explodes. You hear the countdown, we're at the crossroads. You need to separate above from the below. You gotta get in control, you gotta let go. You better decide soon before it explodes.